to. I'd like to call to order the Board of Adjustment meeting for Thursday, August 18th, 2016. Roll call, please.
McGuire?
Here.
Hanson?
Here.
Shriver?
Here.
Stein?
Here.
Albertson?
Here.
Arnold, Johnson, Dolly, and Stonebarger are absent.
First item on the agenda is the approval of the July 21st, 2016 minutes. Could I get a motion in a second?
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mr. Hanson. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Second item on the agenda is the applicant Danielle Lentz, permit number 16922, is asking for conditional use to operate a home daycare business in a single-family home in an R2A district at 715 First Avenue Southwest.
A daycare home is a listed conditional use for the R2A single-family attached residential district per 21-1804, 21-1603-1, and 21-1403-1 and 5, provided that such facilities shall provide not less than 35 square feet of interior floor area and 50 square feet of outdoor recreation space for each child. In addition, such facilities shall supply adequate off-street parking or other suitable plan for the loading and unloading of children so as not to obstruct public streets or create other traffic or safety hazards. Danielle Lentz will regularly utilize the main level of the 1,012 square foot single-family dwelling for the daycare business. The property surpasses the minimum square footage of interior floor area and fenced outdoor recreation space required for 12 children per City Ordinance 21-1403-1. Lentz is not registered with the state. The applicant submitted written request, site plan, and floor plan, which reflect compliance or non-compliance with the following ordinance requirements. 210202 2B6A through H, specific rules governing individual conditional uses, which includes ingress, egress, off-street parking, loading, screening, buffering, signage, exterior lighting, required yards and open space, and general compatibility. In regards to, staff wants to note that in regards to off-street parking and loading, the property has an approximately 18 by 26 foot driveway parking area, allowing for a maximum of 2 legal off-street parking spaces. The minimum number of legal-sized and durable surfaced off-street parking spaces required just for the single-family use is 2. This board may consider requiring additional compliant off-street parking spaces as a condition of secondary use approval and to comply with 21-1403-1 for the safe loading and unloading of children. It appears that vehicles are regularly parked on the boulevard and across the public right-of-way where an improved sidewalk should be. There is not public sidewalk in this area. This boulevard, the concrete driveway appears to have been widened between 2011 and 2014 to allow for more parking on the boulevard. This boulevard parking is not compliant with ordinance and does not count toward the minimum off-street parking space requirements. Chapter 2170, Home Occupations and Standards. Lentz has acknowledged by signature her assurance to comply with those home occupations and standards. No signage is proposed at this time. Chapter 2163, off-street parking and loading requirements, as previously described. Chapter 2165, outside storage and display requirements for specific uses. The outside storage will be typical to the average single-family dwelling. Chapter 2173, landscape and lighting standards. No improved sidewalk is in the area, like I noted before. This board must determine if the request shows satisfactory provisions and arrangement has been provided concerning Chapter 2170, Home Occupations and Standards, 210202, 2B6A through H. Those are the specific rules governing individual conditional uses, and Chapters 2163, 2165, and 2173, as we just went through. If endorsed, this board may also consider fulfillment of any lacking site requirements, such as boulevard sidewalk, additional off-street parking spaces, and/or any other conditions the board deems necessary for secondary use approval. Danielle Lentz is here.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the permit. Jill, I have a question. It's been a while since we've had one of these daycares come before us. We had talked about bouncing the address and the applicants off the fire department and the police department. Did we do that?
Yes, we did.
Fire department, you're okay? Nothing showed up from the police department side?
Right.
Okay.
Joe, I have a question. Is a fence required for daycare? Fenced-in yard?
If you require it.
Right, and there is a fence there, I guess, but there's no requirements for a fence.
It is not required by ordinance.
Okay. Because my concern is that fence didn't seem like it was very high.
It is kind of a little picket fence. Would you like to ask
Sure.
Ms. Lentz about it?
Hi, I'm Danielle Lentz. We figured because my children are smaller, that we didn't need anything higher than 3.5 foot. If it is required to be higher, that's not a problem. We can take care of that as well. I have a very small dog as well, so we didn't think that a larger, higher fence would affect.
When the children are outside, my assumption is they're supervised when they're
Yes,
outside.
they are.
Well, primarily, do you feel comfortable that fence would be adequate for the clients you're going to be taking care of?
Yes, I do. None of them are above the height. Maybe one of them is, who's 4.5, but they don't have access to open the fence. It's on the outside, so they can't unless they reach over.
Any other questions? Anything? Anyone else to speak in the open? Seeing none, I'll close the open, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. Stein,
Second.
second by Mr. Albertson. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Any old business, Joel?
No.
New business? Could I get a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Stein,
Second.
second by Mr. Hanson. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We're adjourned. Okay, Brittany, let me know when you're ready. You ready? I'd like to call to order the Thursday, August 18th, 2016 Watertown City Plan Commission. Roll call, please.
Arnold, absent. McGuire,
Here.
Hanson,
Here.
Shriver,
Here.
Gates,
Here.
Stein,
Here.
Albertson, Johnson, Dolly, and Stoneberger absent.
Thank you. First item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Could I get a motion in a second?
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. McGuire. Second by Mr. Hanson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the August 4th, 2016 meeting.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Hanson. Second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Third item on the agenda is the vacation of the portion of 10th Avenue South between blocks Lot 1, Block 2 on the South Side Edition, and Lot 7, Block 2 of Paulson's Edition.
The petitioners, Tara Jacobson and John Wiles, would like to vacate their portion of 10th Avenue South, which is the east portion, and you guys saw the west portion come through the last Plan Commission meeting. And we would still withhold a utility easement through the entirety of that vacation.
Thank you. Is that the most recent picture of that? Can we get a color picture where you zoom in? I went by there today. Is that all trees? You
Yeah,
can't get
yeah.
out that way right now. When I went down where those storage buildings are and I looked over and tried to line it up as best I could to where 10th Avenue was on the other side. I tell you what, let me open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf of it, because I see Mr. Wiles back there. He can probably step up and tell us what it looks like on the ground there. If I was in that white building and I needed to get to 10th Avenue, could I cross that property with my vehicle to get there?
I seriously doubt it.
So as far as
If you-
egress,
If you went down and looked at it, the portion that's south of my property and north of Tara's property is, somebody's down there with a chainsaw kind of cutting trees and taking lumber or firewood out of there. I don't know who it was, but it didn't hurt it one bit. Having an easement through there for your utilities is not an issue. I don't have any intent to develop it, but I sure would like you guys to come down and pick up your trash and mow your weeds and spray it, because that's what we've been doing. If you intend to put a street through there, gosh, I don't know where you're going to go with it. I listened kind of with some bemusement to the city council meeting regarding maybe having a loop from 3 to 4 and coming across on 10th. I don't think that made much sense, but that's just my perspective on it. I know you want to keep the north-south easement for, I think you got a gas line in there, don't you, Shane? Yeah, gas and water. Don't have any problem with that. Tara and I, joined because it didn't make any sense to leave that chunk if spies were going to vacate the other end of it. But what surprised me, and Justin, you started to address it, there seems to be some element on the city council that believes that you're going to sell these abandoned right-of-ways, and the answer is no. Justin, you're involved in real estate. I mean, when you plat property, you dedicate a public street, and it's an easement. And when you vacate it, it reverts to the adjoining property owners. That's state law. Justin, you started to address it. And Tara is not involved, and you can speak to this, about property line east of 4th Street that was previously vacated. She's got nothing to do with that. So here we sit with a chunk of red hashed property in there that half of it would go to the blue, half of it would go to Spies, and the rest of it would go to Concrete Dakota, or whoever owns that property down there. But right now, you couldn't drive a vehicle through there if you had to.
yeah, that was a question I had when I went through there. It looked fairly undeveloped. It's not a trail or a sneak around, and I didn't get a chance to listen to the city council's meeting on that, but I know from my experience on the Plan Commission, and I don't know what your guys' thought is, but I know we work with developers all the time, and we're asking them to dedicate right-of-way and certain amounts of right-of-way. Just off the top of my head, because that's the first time I've heard it, I think we would have trouble getting developers to give us right-of-way if they were ever going to have to buy back any extra that they gave us.
Well, and what would be the difference between this example and the recent issue we dealt with on South Lake Drive where we, abandoned,
There's no difference if to,
and we didn't ask for,
I've always-
we didn't sell that or attempt to sell that, or were there even a discussion about selling it?
no, I've been on the record many times because I'm an advocate saying if after 50 years we don't need it, we should give it back. But others will disagree with me on that we don't know if we'll ever need it. But I wouldn't. I think we'd run into some developer issues if they're going to give us the least amount possible if they ever thought they would be in a position to have to buy it back generations later.
Yeah, because the law and the decisions are really pretty conclusive, that unless you have a deed to that property and you have a fee interest in it, all you've got is is a right-of-way easement, which reverts.
I think you'd be in trouble trying to figure out the value of what you're going to sell something back for after you paid for.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like
Go
to
ahead.
at least clarify some of the background of all of this discussion. First, I want to point out that, yes, when you look at this right-of-way, it appears that it can't be developed into a street, but it could be. It just takes more effort to improve it, to build a street. The other thing I want to clarify is the current petitioners and the previous action that we were asked to consider, they would be the parties that would pay for the improvements. So now granted, properties can change hands over the years, and ultimately maybe we would get a road built in here, but the reality is the people that are asking for the vacation now are also the same people that would have to pay for an improvement for a roadway to be installed. So I just want that to be clear as well. Then I think the discussion for payment of right-of-way versus not being able to is a slightly different conversation. The city has recently taken over rights for some, we call it right-of-way, but it really wasn't right-of-way dedication on the north bypass. The DOT purchased land from adjoining property owners on what was to be the north bypass. And the city did purchase that land from the state, but that land was just deeded or purchased by the state, so it wasn't dedicated. I think the difference is purchasing land, you could probably resell that land, but if it's dedicated to a public purpose through platting and that process, that's the differentiating piece between being able to sell excess, we called it right away up on the north bypass, but it was property purchased for the intention of building a roadway that's different than dedicated right away.
And Shane's right, that property up there was deeded.
I would also agree with Shane's assessment as to whether a special assessment as opposed to just general city revenue would pay for any kind of street improvement there, given the balance, be for really a localized benefit.
And Shane, you could correct me on that, or Justin, but I think one of the things they talked about is building a road there to connect the two sides, and you say it can't be, you couldn't go through it now. But that was, if you listened to that, John, there were people that wondered if we would ever want to connect it for easier access north and south. So,
Yeah, the conversation involved 3rd and 4th Streets.
right.
And I didn't think it went anyplace because it would be a loop. But
Yeah, well, that was part of it too, though, I think, as to why it was.
But like I said, we've joined because if you're going to have a block of right-of-way in there that goes from nowhere to nowhere, it makes no sense.
So Shane, from the city council standpoint, was it tabled because they wanted to explore giving it back or selling it back, or was it tabled because they were more concerned about whether it truly is excess and the road would ever need to be there? Because we've dead-ended, the primary use of that, if that 10th Avenue existed, would be off Highway 81, but we've already vacated that section of it, so.
Yeah, and I can't speak exactly to the council's intentions, but the gist of the conversation is once we vacate this property and somebody else has a repurpose for the vacation, what value or is it, the concern is reselling vacated property that they get for nothing to somebody at a substantial profit going forward. That was one concern that was raised, but I can't speak to that in this process. We're being petitioned to vacate right away back to the adjoining parcels.
I would always look back and go, if we vacate it and they sell it at a substantial value, well, they gave it to us at a substantial value when they dedicated it to us years ago.
Right.
Different times and different dollars, but inflated dollars, we gave them back what they gave us, so.
Correct.
So
And that's the-
just not here nor
Yep,
there.
and
just
that's
a
the
personal
premise of
opinion.
vacating right away. It's dedicated to the city. We can use it if and when we need it. And if we don't use it, we can give it back.
And that's the million-dollar question is, are we sure we're never gonna need it? Because we don't wanna have to try to recover that at
Right.
another time. It's a different way to
Yep.
do that. But that was, in this area, we worked on this, years ago. We had some questions as to the way things were platted there, because things didn't develop the way they were platted 50, 60 years ago. So here we sit.
Once we close the public hearing, I'll give you my closing comment.
Tara, do you want to say anything? Okay.
All right, any other questions? With that, I'll close the public hearing, ask for a motion and a second for further discussion. Motion by Mr. Stein. No second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Hanson. Any other discussion? And you mentioned you had a question.
Okay, so, I think what would benefit this board, and you can make your decision independent of what I'm gonna recommend, of course. I think what I would recommend is that you approve this vacation request based upon your previous award of or recommendation of vacating the other half of the block. And the council will weigh all of the options and discussion that's been had to date and take care of it at the September 6th council meeting. Your petition needs have a notice that can't make it by the August 22nd meeting, so we'll reconsider both at the the September 6th meeting, just for clarification. We have to make sure that we don't derail the process by missing our notice date. Nope, you heard correctly, but that we made too abrupt a decision at that meeting.
All right, thank you, Shane. Any other comments? See none, I'll ask for a vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Fourth item on the agenda is the plat of the Meadows 7th edition.
So the petitioner, John Mills with Mills Development, is the current owner of the existing Lot A, Block 3, Dakota Commons Edition. The property is a conforming lot in the PUD. The lot is approximately 12,383 square feet and will be divided into twin homes, which adheres to the preliminary plan proposed for the PUD. And the Meadows 7th edition is consistent with the master plan of Dakota Commons accepted in June 2002.
Thank you. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the plat. Can you pull the plat up? I had one question that Mr. Stonebarger brought up, and I'd like to ask you that. Make it the picture, the photo, the next one in our packet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, where it shows that pie shape behind it, his question was, is there's a pie-shaped piece of property behind it. My assumption is that their rear lot line will match up with, skip a lot that hasn't been platted and meet up with the lot that's platted. The question was, is that park dedication? What's that space back behind there?
Within the PUD, that's just part of their common area, which they have a lot of there. They have their own sidewalks, their own common area and everything else out there. So that area there, more than likely, is just gonna be a designated grassland and
It's
nothing
kind of
more.
because it's a PUD, it's the common
It's because
area.
it's the PUD, and that's what they brought to us at the time with the.
And that
overall-
matches their master plan from,
Yes.
the lot sizes are compliant.
Yes.
There's no non-compliance in this plat whatsoever. We can safely say that. my assumption that it was a common area, park dedication of some sort, that's why they didn't include because you could see the sidewalk
We'll
goes
use
through
this one
there.
as an example. This is the previous lot, and this one carries the same thing. So the way the PUD works is this, everything inside this box, outside of the blue lines, is owned by the association. The lots that are for sale and become someone else's property are the two parcels within the blue lines.
Could you say that one more time?
Okay, so on this plat of this lot, there's 3 owners. There's the association owns the green space and maintains the lawns and all snow removal and all that. And then the walls, within the walls, are owned by individual owners. It's
Okay.
it's a similarity to a
Condo. Yeah.
scenario, but
Interesting.
with, defined ownership. So, the next lot, or the lot you're being asked to consider is actually the next square here. And then everything that doesn't get parceled off by plats still is retained by ownership by the association.
So the legal description of their land is inside the blue?
Right. So what happened is this original tract is called Outlot A. So we're parceling off pieces of Outlot A, and everything that doesn't get pieced off with its own plat still remains Outlot A.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak in the open? Any questions?
Is this any different than all the other twin homes on this property?
It is not.
Shane, if I might, Mr. Chairman, do we want to discuss the administrative authority potentially associated with this?
I would recommend that we do that outside of the hearing.
Okay, we'll do.
All right. Anything else in the open? No further questions. I'll close the open, ask for a motion and a second for discussion. Motion by Mr. McGuire, second by Mr. Hanson. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 5th item on is the ordinance change to revise city ordinance 21 or we want to go back to the last one?
Okay, well, we wanted some clarification, direction for staff. Going through this process, we brought this to you as a traditional plat because we had concerns about being able to administratively plat it, which was how it was originally presented to us as staff. And then some questions arose because we were following traditional platting procedures, not relative to considering this as a PUD. So we've done some further digging in the interpretation of the PUD process and how that fits within our city system. So in essence, we believe that our city ordinance through the PUD process would allow me to administratively plat any portion within the PUD.
Because normally you could administratively plat 5 lots or less, correct?
Correct.
And in a
But-
PUD, it was, the opinion was that you could or could not?
The opinion now is that we
Could.
we can administratively plat things as long as they didn't include public utility improvements, roadways, and the things that are required by a major plat.
More than 5 lots in a PUD allowable to be administratively plat, or does the
As long
5
as
lots still?
As long as all of the infrastructure is,
Nothing's
there.
changed, it meets the master plan, you could say, here's 10 lots of similar origin of this. You could say in a PUD, we could administratively plat 10 lots. Outside of a PUD, we could only administratively plat 5.
in theory.
Okay.
And just for clarification, I mean, this is the first time we've actually looked at it from this perspective, and we wanted to be clear. And so really what I'm going to ask is, I know you just approved or did a motion to approve, but I would like to be able to administratively plat this parcel. It saves them the publication dates and some time on the back end of the plating process. And really, there are other issues with the PUD that we want to address going forward outside of these parcels. I mean, greater discussion, and we'll bring those forward.
And theoretically, in a PUD, as those come before us, we've gone through those with, I would say, a finer tooth comb than we normally do. We're safer inside a PUD to give more authority than we are outside a PUD. Fair statement?
That is the
The-
premise of a PUD.
That's what I thought, is if they're coming to us for every single lot, we kind of defeated part of the purpose of a PUD. And when it comes to a developer, putting a month on anything toward the tail end of a building season isn't user-friendly.
Yep, and that's what our concern is as staff processing these things.
I don't see any issues with this, do you guys? I don't see why we would tighten the noose on a PUD when it's really not designed to be tightened.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, the handout before you for Agenda Item 4 kind of lays out the authorities that underlie Shane's point here, and his authority to administratively approve. The statutory authority, as many of you know, 1136, which allows for a governing body to establish via ordinance the ability to appoint an official to administratively approve plats and additions, subdivisions. In this circumstance, it appears that Shane has been, or that the city engineer has been granted authority to administratively approve PUD minor changes as well as minor plats. And so these authorities lay that out. I can go into further detail if anybody would like. Okay.
Thank you. Got everything in? We're good? Now, number 5, the ordinance change to revise city ordinance 21.1003.
This ordinance would be to change all commercial zoning maximum building heights to 60 feet. And I can have Ken speak on that.
This is an item we discussed earlier ourselves, that we thought the 30 feet wasn't high enough for some of these newer construction projects that might be coming along. And so we opted on the 60 foot, and this is even being a little bit premised on some possible building structures that will be coming in. So again, it's really nothing new. This is something we discussed as a Plan Commission group already, put forward to raise this and elevate it up and get it into a higher thing. Hampton Inn had to come in and get a variance.
From a side
Holiday
note,
Inn had to come in
how
and
many
get a
do we
variance.
already have that are over 30 feet?
Almost all the hotels are. So everyone's had to come in and get a variance to be there, and then we've allowed them anyway. They're not anywhere close to air spacing. If they are air spacing, we'll air space them anyway.
So
and verify.
take a step back there. If they happen to be in a runway protection zone or anything, that would come up in the building permit process anyway.
And
So
go
that's
through air
nothing for
spacing
us to
anyway,
worry
yeah.
about.
Yep.
No sense in us double.
Nope. So strongly recommend that go forward with this.
All right. With that, I'll open the public hearing if anyone's here to speak on behalf or against the ordinance change. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Ask for a motion and a second for any discussion. Motion by Mr. Stein. Second by Mr. McGuire. Any questions or concerns on the building height? With that, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Any old business? Anything on the table? Anything we have to, no new business?
Nope, no new business.
No executive session. Need a motion to adjourn? Motion by Mr. Stein, second by Mr. McGuire. All in favor, say aye. Opposed? Motion carries.